Okay, so I'm going to talk really about symptom management, medically unexplained symptoms, or even symptoms associated with disability, but specifically really medically unexplained symptoms are one of the most common problems that the GP will see. In fact, 50% of people who go to the GP and are seen in medical outpatients have a medically unexplained symptom. So, as most of you will know, my main interest has been fatigue, and paradoxically, of course, it's kept me pretty busy over the last 20 years. So I'm interested really in the power of behavioural change and the role of cognitions and perceptions in symptom severity and disability. And then going on from trying to understand what contributes to the symptoms and disability, really what treatments are effective for symptoms. Although fatigue has been one of my main areas of interest, we've also been interested in irritable bowel syndrome and more recently disease-related fatigue. Again, it's a very common problem and ubiquitous in most diseases that you'll see in a general hospital. In addition, we're also interested in what are the common mediators of treatment. So what are the treatment processes responsible for change in the context of treatment, and what predicts treatment outcome? So really interested now in whether these our explanatory models have anything in common with each other. So this is an example of a trial that we have recently completed and was published in The Lancet in January. This really evolved from work that had been done by Peter White at Barts, Michael Sharp, who's now in Oxford, and Simon Wesley and I at King's, initially at the National Hospital for Neurology. And we were seeing lots of patients with fatigue and substantial disability. And I think the three of us were seeing patients at similar times of our career. And Peter developed a treatment, a graded exercise treatment, which really found similar outcomes to the treatments that we had found using cognitive behaviour therapy, with improvements being seen in relation to fatigue and levels of disability. So really this particular study was carried out in response to the fact that although earlier smallish trials had been conducted, some of the patient organisations were not convinced by these studies and felt that adaptive pacing therapy or specialist medical care would be better alternatives. So we thought we would carry out a bigger trial, an effectiveness study, as opposed to a small efficacy study, and we randomised 640 patients to receive either specialist medical care alone or specialist medical care plus one of three treatments. Two rehabilitative treatments based on slightly different models, that was graded exercise therapy and cognitive behaviour therapy, or adaptive pacing therapy, which was really based on a slightly different model of understanding. That was really based on the idea that the process of fatigue wasn't going to change substantially in relation to you changing your behaviour and your cognitions. So what we found at the end of the arduous, probably about 10 years, was that the two rehabilitative treatments, graded exercise therapy and cognitive behaviour therapy, resulted in lower levels of disability and lower levels of fatigue, in contrast to adaptive pacing therapy and specialist medical care. As you can see at 52 weeks in the first graph, the two rehabilitative treatments at the top, the purple and the green line, were doing better than the adaptive pacing therapy and specialist medical care. The same pattern of results, but the other way around, because fatigue is the higher the score, the worse the outcome. Fatigue reduced in the rehabilitative treatments. So we've been measuring cognitive and behavioural responses and examined whether they mediate treatment outcome in a number of different trials. And in the context of a randomised controlled trial in which we treated patients with irritable bowel syndrome with mebeverine hydrochloride, which is an antispasmodic medication, plus cognitive behaviour therapy, we found that changes in behaviour, people's coping behaviour, and changes in cognition mediated the change in symptoms, disability and distress, and we found full mediation for anxiety or distress, which is really interesting because it's rare that one finds that full mediation. We've started to look at what's mediating change in our PACE trial and found that both cognitive and behavioural responses have mediated change in disability in CBT and graded exercise therapy. We've found similar things, cognitive responses and behavioural responses in being important in both medically unexplained symptoms associated with lots of disability as well as various diseases such as cancer, MS and rheumatoid arthritis.